Have you ever looked up at the night sky, breathing slow and letting the silence settle over your soul, and wondered, what are the deep mysteries of heaven? What unfolds within that unseen spiritual realm where battles rage and destinies are shaped, long before a single breath warmed human lips? If you've ever been haunted by these questions, aching for wisdom that whispers behind the veil, do me a favor, pause now, like this video, subscribe to Jesus Speaks Today, and type 777 in the comments. Not just for the algorithm, but because your yearning, your holy curiosity, marks you as one of the chosen generation. Those who refuse to be satisfied by surface answers and instead wrestle for revelation, reaching as deep as the labyrinthine corridors of eternity itself. Let us begin with a journey into ancient Jerusalem, in the shadowed days of Jehoiakim, king of Judah. Imagine the trembling silence as Babylon's mighty forces advanced, their banners casting gloom over Zion's golden hills. The Lord, mysteriously and sovereignly, allowed Jehoiakim to fall into Nebuchadnezzar's hand. Sacred vessels from the temple, once filled with offerings and prayers, were seized and carried away to the godless land of Shinar, a land foreign not just in language and custom, but in spirit and purpose. Amidst the exiles were children of Judah's nobility, boys untouched by sorrow or stain, radiant in youth: Daniel, Hananiah, Mishael, and Azariah. Their lives, charted for privilege, were savagely rewritten by defeat. Now ponder the weight of exile. In Psalm 137 the lament rings, "By the rivers of Babylon there we sat down, yea, we wept when we remembered Zion." The trauma was not merely of land or loss, but of identity. How easy it would have been to let the current of empire smooth out the distinctiveness of their faith. But the king's designs were not just political, they were spiritual. Nebuchadnezzar, in stroke, after calculated stroke, aimed to erase the roots of these chosen boys. He commanded that they be tutored in the literature and language of the Chaldeans, consuming daily the rich food and wine of Babylon. Here, Daniel faced his first storm. The menu, luxurious and tempting, had its own curse: food given to idols, prepared in defiance of the God whose law had shaped their lives back in Jerusalem. Daniel's resolve, the quiet but unyielding decision not to defile himself, became a cornerstone moment not only for himself but for all who would later stand at the intersection of compromise and conviction. With humility and respect, he appealed not in rebellion but in gentle negotiation. Test us with vegetables and water for 10 days. Judge us by our health, not by our fealty to custom. Pause now to consider the philosophy beneath Daniel's request. True faith is not noisy arrogance. It is conviction dressed in humility, a willingness to stand out, believing that God honors those who honor him, as echoed in 1 Samuel. "Those who honor me, I will honor." The 10-day test became not a gamble, but a quiet declaration of spiritual confidence. As the days passed, Daniel and his friends grew healthier, more radiant, fatter in flesh, an outward testimony of an inward dedication. After 3 years of discipline and learning, they stood before Nebuchadnezzar. And it was as if the wisdom of Jerusalem, now refined, not erased by exile, rose and shone amidst the magicians and enchanters of Babylon. The king, who had set out to stamp God's children with his own image, now found them 10 times more discerning and insightful than any in the Babylonian courts. The exiles, faithful in obscurity, were elevated to prominence, not by flattery or assimilation, but by faithfulness to the invisible hand of God working in captive hearts. Yet as we reflect, let the psalmist's words probe our hearts. How shall we sing the Lord's song in a strange land? Psalm 137:4. Daniel teaches us, by living, not merely professing, that true identity is not location-dependent. It is rooted, watered by faithfulness in secret. Whether you face a culture hostile or indifferent to your deepest values, the call resounds. Do not compromise the inner altar for the palatable offerings of this world. Remember, spiritual transformation often begins not with dramatic miracles, but with private loyalty, 1,000 quiet choices to honor God in the unseen places of the heart. If this question stirs you, if your spirit resonates with the longing for heaven's mysteries, let your voice be heard. Subscribe now, for this journey is just beginning. In the next section, we'll plunge deeper. When the king's temper turned terrifying and impossible demands shattered the illusion of human wisdom. What did Daniel do? What mysteries did God unveil? And what hope does that hold for us in our own lands of exile and compromise? The answers are not just stories, they are blueprints for courageous souls. Let us press on together. The court of Babylon, though dressed in gold and splendor, was a place of shadows. Nebuchadnezzar's throne stood high, but his sleep was shaken by something greater than human power. A dream so vivid, so heavy with unseen weight, that it ripped slumber from his eyes. He woke not only afraid, but desperate. His mind churned in restless darkness. There was no peace in his palace that night. And when morning came, he summoned his magicians, enchanters, sorcerers, and astrologers to stand before him. "Tell me, my dream," the king demanded, his voice edged with fire, "and tell me its interpretation." The wise men exchanged anxious glances. Surely, they thought, the king must first recount his dream before they could offer an explanation. "O king, live forever," one began. "Tell your servants the dream, and we will reveal its meaning." But Nebuchadnezzar's eyes hardened. This was no ordinary request. It was a test, a gauntlet thrown down. "The word from me is firm," he barked. "If you do not make known to me the dream itself and its interpretation, you will be torn limb from limb and your houses reduced to ruins. But if you do, there will be rewards, treasures, and great honor." The room fell colder. Another servant, voice trembling, pleaded again for the king to tell the dream, but Nebuchadnezzar cut them off, his suspicion growing. "I know what you are doing. You are buying time. But my decree stands. Tell me the dream, or you will die." Panic gripped the palace. Every wise man of Babylon suddenly faced a sentence of death. This royal decree reached Daniel's ears soon enough, carried on the footsteps of Arioch, the captain of the guard. But Daniel did not meet the news with fear or outrage. He met it with calm, with something rare in a crisis, measured discernment. "Why is the decree of the king so urgent?" he asked with quiet strength. Arioch explained the impossible demand that had doomed the wise men. Daniel's response was bold yet composed. "Bring me before the king and give me time. I will declare to him the dream and its interpretation." That night, as the Babylonian city lay under the dark canopy of stars, Daniel gathered his faithful companions, Hananiah, Mishael, and Azariah. They did not turn first to strategy, nor to the archives of Chaldean knowledge. They turned to heaven. Daniel urged them, "Seek mercy from the God of heaven concerning this mystery, so that we might not perish with the rest of the wise men of Babylon." And here we pause to listen to the quiet thunder of faith. When the entire weight of the empire's wrath loomed over them, they sought the face of God because they knew that divine revelation is not earned by human cunning, but given by grace to those who ask. Psalm 25 says, "The secret of the Lord is with them that fear him, and he will show them his covenant." That very night, in the hidden stillness, the mystery was unveiled to Daniel, in a vision that must have burned with both clarity and awe. He did not race first to the court with his answer. Instead, he bowed in worship, letting gratitude rise before the one who knew what was hidden in the depths of darkness. Blessed be the name of God forever and ever, Daniel prayed. Wisdom and might are his. He changes times and seasons. He removes kings and sets up kings. He reveals deep and hidden things. He knows what is in the darkness, and the light dwells with him. When Daniel finally stood before Nebuchadnezzar, there was no pride in his voice, no sense that his own intellect had solved the riddle. His first words were humility, wrapped in boldness. No wise man, no enchanter, no magician, and no astrologer can explain to the king the mystery he has asked about, but there is a God in heaven who reveals mysteries. Then Daniel unfolded the dream. The great image loomed in the king's vision, terrifying in its splendor. The head was pure gold, its chest and arms silver, its belly and thighs bronze, its legs iron, its feet a fragile mixture of iron and clay. The king had seen a sudden, inexplicable force, a stone cut without human hands, hurtling down, striking the image upon its brittle feet until the entire statue shattered and blew away like chaff in the wind. The stone became a mountain that filled the whole earth. This was no mere nightmare. It was a revelation of the rise and fall of kingdoms, stretched out like a timeline written in God's own hand. Daniel explained, the head of gold, Babylon, ruled by Nebuchadnezzar and exalted by the God of heaven. Then would come another kingdom, inferior signified by silver, the Medo-Persian Empire. After that, a third of bronze, swift to conquer, the Greek Empire. Then a fourth kingdom, iron, crushing and unyielding, Rome, strong yet destined for division, its weakness hidden in the mingling of iron and clay. And then, the stone. This stone was unlike any earthly empire. It bore no human ambition, no political alliance. Its foundation was divine, eternal. In the days of those kings, Daniel declared, the God of heaven will set up a kingdom that will never be destroyed. All others would crumble. This kingdom would stand forever. The eye seen in the court shifted from fear to awe. The mighty Nebuchadnezzar, who moments before threatened death without pity, now bowed his face to the ground before Daniel. His words were a confession from the lips of a pagan king. Truly your God is God of gods and Lord of kings, and a revealer of mysteries. Daniel was exalted, clothed in honor, made ruler over the province of Babylon, and his three friends were placed in positions of authority. And yet, something deeper lingers for us in this story. The world we live in still erects statues, not of gold and silver perhaps, but towering icons of culture, ideologies, and power. They gleam in the sun, fearful in their stature, convincing many they will last forever. But Daniel's vision tells us the truth. Every empire, every system, every false god built by human hands is destined to fall before the kingdom that is not made by human hands. The question is not if that kingdom will come. It is whether we will recognize and honor its king while the golden statues still stand. Before we step into the next part of Daniel's story, a fiery trial of defiance and deliverance, pause and consider. Are there statues in your life, gleaming but fragile, that you are tempted to bow to? Comfort, approval, power? Or will you, like Daniel, fix your eyes on the stone that will outlast them all? If these truths stir something in you, take a moment to share this message, subscribe to Jesus Speaks Today, and tell in the comments what you see as the statues in our modern world. The next part will take us into fire itself, not as a metaphor, but as a furnace where faith is tested in the most literal way. And you will see, God does not always take his servants out of the fire. Sometimes he walks with them inside it. The sun had barely risen over the plains of Dura when the command swept through every province of Babylon. All peoples, nations, and languages assemble. Messengers carried the king's words like a windstorm, leaving no corner untouched. Nebuchadnezzar, crowned in pride after his dream had been interpreted by Daniel, had built a towering monument, a golden image 90 feet high, gleaming under the desert sun. It stood like a new mountain forged by men's hands, a counterfeit, echo of that stone in his dream, the one cut without human hands that would fill the whole earth. Instead of bowing to God's eternal kingdom, the king attempted to immortalize his own glory. On the plain, the air shimmered with heat, the sound of hammer and chisel fading as the colossal idol's final touches were made. The order was clear. When the music began, horn, flute, zither, lyre, harp, pipes, and a crescendo of every instrument, every person was to fall prostrate before the golden image. To remain standing was an act of rebellion and would be punished, not by imprisonment, not by exile, but by immediate death in the consuming heart of a furnace heated 7 times hotter than normal. Here the world's demand collided with heaven's command. Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego, the very companions who had once prayed with Daniel over Nebuchadnezzar's mysterious dream, stood among the gathered multitudes. Around them, a sea of people knelt when the first notes swelled in the air. Dust rose as millions of bodies lowered, but the 3 remained upright, unmoved, like trees rooted in rock against a howling wind. Whispers rippled, eyes turned. Jealous officials, men who had long resented the favor these foreigners enjoyed, seized the moment and went seeking the king. Their voices were like venom dripped into Nebuchadnezzar's ear. "O king, live forever. You have made a decree that when the music plays, all must fall down and worship the image you have made, and that whoever does not shall be thrown into the fiery furnace. But there are certain Jews, Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego, whom you have appointed over the affairs of Babylon. They pay no regard to you, O king. They do not serve your gods, nor worship the image you have set up." Rage surged through Nebuchadnezzar, like a wave breaking against stone. The summons came immediately. The 3 young men stood before the monarch who had conquered nations. His voice boomed, "Is it true, Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego, that you do not serve my gods or worship the golden image I have set up?" Without pausing for an answer, he made them an offer draped in threat. "If you are ready when the music plays again to fall down and worship the image I have made, well and good. But if you do not, you shall be cast this very hour into the burning fiery furnace, and what God will be able to deliver you out of my hands?" What followed was not defiance born of arrogance, it was the calm steel of unshakable faith. "O Nebuchadnezzar," they replied, "we have no need to defend ourselves before you in this matter. If we are thrown into the blazing furnace, the God we serve is able to deliver us from it, and he will deliver us from your hand, O king. But if not, be it known to you, O king, that we will not serve your gods or worship the golden image you have set up." These words, "but if not," form the backbone of true faith. They acknowledged God's power to save, yet refused to make their obedience conditional on the outcome. How shallow is the faith that believes only when the miracles come. Yet these 3 embodied the psalm's spirit. "Though I walk through the valley of the shadow of death, I will fear no evil, for you are with me." Nebuchadnezzar's fury reached fever pitch. His face twisted, his heart closed. He ordered the furnace to be stoked 7-fold. The heat poured out in waves, distorting the air, pulling sweat from the brows of even the soldiers. Mighty men bound. The 3 in ropes so thick they seemed fit to hold back lions. The command rang out. They were carried to the opening and hurled into the roaring heart of flame. The fire's hunger was so fierce that it leaped out and consumed the very soldiers who had thrown them in. Then, a moment that defies the laws of earth, came the miracle. Nebuchadnezzar, leaning forward to see the execution complete, froze. His voice cracked, half in disbelief, half in awe. "Did we not throw 3 men bound into the fire?" His counselors nodded. The king's eyes widened. "But I see 4 men, unbound, walking in the midst of the fire, and they are not hurt. And the appearance of the 4th is like a son of the gods. In that furnace, the ropes had burned away, but the garments were whole. The flesh was unscarred." Most wondrously, they were not alone. The presence that walked beside them, whether we call him the angel of the Lord or we recognize in him the pre-incarnate Christ, was the same deliverer promised from ages past, the same one who says in Isaiah, "When you walk through the fire, you shall not be burned, and the flame shall not consume you." Nebuchadnezzar approached as close as the heat would allow and shouted into the flames, "Shadrach, Meshach, Abednego, servants of the Most High God, come out!" And they did, every eye fixed on them, as though the world itself paused to witness the impossible. Officers gathered close, expecting at least the smell of smoke clinging to their hair and robes. But there was nothing. Not a scorch, not a singe, not even the whisper of fire. And then the confession from the lips of the once arrogant king. "Blessed be the God of Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego, who has sent his angel and delivered his servants, who trusted in him and set aside the king's command, yielding up their bodies rather than serve or worship any god except their own God." The decree followed, that none in his empire should speak against this God. But beneath the royal words lies the eternal truth. God had not delivered them from entering the fire, he had given them his presence in the fire. And so it is with us. In our own days of trial, we pray for escape, but heaven sometimes answers with companionship instead. The fire that is meant to destroy becomes the place where the world sees who walks with us. So I ask you, what furnace stands before you today? Is it fear of tomorrow, loss, rejection, persecution for what is true? Remember this: the same God who walked with Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego steps into the heat with his own. Your deliverance may not be the absence of flames, but the absolute inability of those flames to harm what God has claimed as his own. And as we move into the next chapter of Daniel's life, we will see another form of trial, this time not of heat, but of hungry jaws. A trap is set, laws are twisted, and an old man will be flung into a den of lions. Will God save him as he did in the furnace? The answer will again show that his dominion has no end. If you are still journeying with me, don't forget, share your thoughts below, subscribe to Jesus Speaks Today, and let the fire you've walked through be a testimony. For someone, else your trial might be their proof that God never leaves his own. The years had etched lines of wisdom across Daniel's face. He was no longer the young exile standing before a furious Babylonian king, but an elder statesman whose loyalty and flawless integrity commanded the respect of kings. Yet, as so often happens in this world, faithfulness had stirred jealousy. The Medo-Persian Empire now ruled, and under King Darius's reign, Daniel's character shone so brightly that the king planned to set him over the entire kingdom. This was not ambition on Daniel's part. It was the inevitable outcome of excellence, discipline, and unshakable righteousness. But such honor provokes envy. A web of conspirators, administrators, and satraps met in whispered corners, driven by a venomous question: how can we bring him down? They examined every detail of his work, searching for failure, corruption, or even negligence, but the scrolls came back clean. Daniel was incorruptible. One among them spoke the poisonous thought aloud, "We will find no fault against this Daniel, unless it is connected to the law of his God." And so the trap was baited, not with politics or gold, but with the weapon of forced worship. They approached the king with cunning flattery. "O King Darius, live forever. We advise that you establish a royal decree that for 30 days no one should petition any god or man except to you, O king, under penalty of being thrown into the den of lions." Their conspiracy worked because it appealed to human pride. Darius, pleased by the thought of 30 days of unchallenged homage, signed the decree. Under the unchangeable law of the Medes and Persians, even the king himself could not revoke. Daniel heard of the decree, but his reaction is the heart of the matter. He did not cower. He did not plot a secret escape. He simply went back to what he had always done. 3 times a day, with windows open toward Jerusalem, he knelt and prayed, giving thanks to the God who had walked with him through decades of exile. That choice, so steady, so unremarkable in its routine, was the defiance of a lifetime. He could have reasoned with himself, God will understand if I skip public prayer for a month. I can still believe in silence. But Daniel knew that compromise of this kind is not silence. It is agreement with fear. His prayer was not for show. It was for survival of the soul. In the stillness of that upper room, before the God of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, Daniel's life was aligned once again to the true sovereign. The conspirators were ready. They burst in to catch him in the very act of praying and ran to the king with their triumph. "O king, have you not signed the decree? Did you know your favored Daniel continues to petition his God 3 times a day?" Darius's heart sank. The snare had closed, and he realized too late that he himself had triggered it. Scripture says he labored until sundown, seeking a loophole to rescue his trusted servant. But the law was ironclad. With grief on his face, he ordered Daniel brought to the lion's den. As the sun dipped low and shadows pooled in the city's streets, the king spoke words heavy with both hope and helplessness. "May your God, whom you serve continually, deliver you." The stone was rolled across the mouth of the den and sealed with the royal signet. Night fell over the empire, but it was not just Daniel who kept vigil. Darius, in his palace, could not eat, could not sleep, could find no comfort. Sometimes it is the unbeliever who lies awake, wrestling with the possibility of God's power. At the break of dawn, the king rose and hurried to the den. His voice trembled with urgency and longing. "O Daniel, servant of the living God, has your God, whom you serve continually, been able to deliver you from the lions?" Then, from the darkness, came the voice, calm, confident, echoing with the authority of survival. "O king, live forever. My God sent his angel and shut the lions' mouths, and they have not harmed me, because I was found blameless before him, and also before you, O king, I have done no wrong." What must it have been like in that pit through the night? The lions, breath hot in the chill air, their bodies brushing against him, yet their instincts stilled by an unseen hand. There are moments in life when God's intervention is not a sweeping earthquake or a wall of fire, but the subtle holding back of destruction, danger still near enough to touch, but powerless to harm. Darius was overjoyed. Daniel was lifted from the den, and the record says, "No manner of hurt was found on him, because he had trusted in his God." Trust, here, was not just belief. It was the quiet readiness to die rather than betray the one who had sustained him for a lifetime. Justice was swift. The same men who had schemed against Daniel were thrown into the den, along with their families, and before their bodies reached the floor, the lions overpowered them. Then came the decree, not from a trembling Jewish exile, but from the throne of a pagan king to every nation under his rule. "I make a decree that in all my royal dominion people are to fear and reverence the God of Daniel, for he is the living God, enduring forever. His kingdom shall never be destroyed, and his dominion shall be to the end. He delivers and rescues. He works signs and wonders in heaven and on earth, he who has saved Daniel from the power of the lions." Daniel prospered, not because life spared him from danger, but because life could not undo the protection and purpose of God upon him. And here is the meditation we cannot escape. The lion's den takes many forms today. It may be a room full of doubting coworkers, a courtroom, of injustice, the suffocating weight of a diagnosis, or the loss of something you could not imagine living without. The roar is loud. The teeth are real. But so is the angel of the Lord who stands guard over his own. We often ask for the den to disappear, but what if God's greater glory comes in showing the world that we can sleep on the den floor and wake, unharmed? That the very thing designed to kill us becomes the stage where his power is seen most clearly? As we step forward, Daniel's story begins to shift from personal deliverance to cosmic revelation. Visions of beasts, of thrones, of a son of man whose kingdom will outlast every empire. In the next part of our journey, we will stand with Daniel as heaven's curtains are pulled back and we glimpse the architecture of God's final victory. If you followed this far, think about your own lion's den. Share it in the comments, not just as a prayer request, but as a declaration of trust, because the same God who sent his angel to Daniel has not changed. And if you haven't yet, remember to subscribe to Jesus Speaks Today, so that together we can keep uncovering the patterns of God's unshakable kingdom. The visions came not in the rush of daylight, but in the deep hours when the world is hushed and the soul is most able to hear eternity's whisper. Daniel, now aged and seasoned by years of walking with God through courts and crises, found his heart heavy yet open, for the Spirit of the Lord was about to unveil realities far beyond his human lifespan. It was in the first year of King Belshazzar's reign that a dream descended upon Daniel's mind, so vivid it seemed as though the very fabric of the sea and sky had been pulled back. He saw a restless ocean beneath the night winds, and from its dark, churning waters rose 4 great beasts, each unlike the other. They came in succession, not as isolated symbols, but as the unfolding of history itself, the march of empires, shaped and permitted by the Ancient of Days. The first was like a lion, yet bore the wings of an eagle. Daniel watched as its wings were torn away, and it stood on 2 feet like a man, and the heart of a man was given to it. This was Babylon in its glory, and in its humbling. Its king lifted in pride, then brought low to acknowledge heaven's rule. The second beast appeared, massive and deliberate, like a bear raised on one side, 3 ribs clenched in its teeth. It was told, "Arise, devour much flesh." This was the empire of the Medes and Persians, powerful, methodical, devouring territories in its appointed time. Next came a leopard, swift and cunning, its back crowned with 4 wings and its head divided into 4. This signified the Greek Empire, Alexander's lightning conquests, and the later fracture of his dominion into 4 realms after his death. But then Daniel's vision darkened with the rise of the 4th beast, terrifying, dreadful, exceedingly strong. It devoured and crushed with iron teeth and trampled everything underfoot. It was unlike the others. Its power was unmatched, its presence overwhelming. Rome and all those powers to spring from its legacy would rule not just by brute force, but by law, culture, and fear, spanning centuries. This beast sprouted 10 horns, and from among them came a little horn, arrogant and boastful, speaking great things against the Most High. Power swelled in him, and he waged war against the saints, appearing to prevail, but only for a season, ordained by God. And then the scene shifted from earth's raging to heaven's throne room. Daniel saw thrones set in place, and the Ancient of Days took his seat. His clothing was white as snow, his hair like pure wool. His throne blazed with fire, its wheels burning with flame. A river of fire flowed forth before him. 10,000 times 10,000 stood before him. The court was seated, and the books were opened. Here every boast, every cruelty of the kingdoms of men met the gaze of infinite holiness. The boastful horn was judged, its dominion stripped and destroyed forever. The other beasts lost their power, though they lingered for a time by heaven's allowance, and Daniel saw one like a son of man, coming with the clouds of heaven. He approached the Ancient of Days, and to him was given dominion, glory, and a kingdom, that all peoples, nations, and languages should serve him. His dominion is everlasting, and his kingdom will not pass away. This vision rattled Daniel deeply. For while the end was glorious, the journey was filled with opposition, pain, and long years of apparent defeat for the faithful. He longed for understanding, and heaven granted it. The beasts were kingdoms. The saints would endure the horns. Oppression for a time, times, and half a time. But then judgment would be rendered in favor of God's people, and they would possess the kingdom forever. This is the tension we live in, even now. We walk between the promise of an unshakable eternal reign and the daily reality of empires and forces that oppose the truth. Like Daniel, our hearts may tremble at what lies ahead, yet the vision is also a promise carved into eternity. The key, Ancient of Days, is not shaken, and the Son of Man's kingdom is inevitable. Years later, under the same king, a different kind of message startled the world. It was a feast night in Babylon. Inside the palace, laughter and music resounded as King Belshazzar and his lords drank wine from cups that once stood in the holy temple of God. They raised toasts to gods of gold and silver, bronze, iron, wood, and stone, mocking the true God in their arrogance. But amid the blasphemous revelry, silence fell. A hand, detached from any visible body, appeared and began writing on the plaster wall, "Many, many, Tekel Parson." The king's bravado melted, his face drained of color, his knees knocked together. None of his wise men could read the words. But the Queen Mother remembered Daniel, the one through whom God reveals mysteries. Daniel, now an old man, entered not as a supplicant, but with the dignity of one who serves the King of Kings. He refused Belshazzar's offers of purple robes, gold chains, and rank. "Let your gifts be for yourself," he said. "I will read the writing for the king." And then he laid bare the truth. God had numbered Belshazzar's days and brought his kingdom to an end. He had been weighed and found wanting. His kingdom was divided and given to the Medes and Persians. That very night, the sentence was carried out. Babylon fell. For Daniel, the handwriting on the wall was never just about Babylon. It was a living principle for all time. Nations, and indeed individuals, stand before the scales of divine justice. Pride, idolatry, and unrepentance inevitably tip the scale toward judgment. We may forget this in times of peace, but history has a way of reminding us that God's decrees cannot be overturned. When you read these visions and sudden judgments, do you see the connecting thread? The God who sits enthroned as Ancient of Days is not distant. He tracks every kingdom's rise and fall. He weighs every human heart. He sets boundaries for evil's duration, and he has already given the nations to his Son. And so, even if you feel surrounded by beasts in your own life, systems, powers, or even personal battles that roar and threaten, the end remains unaltered. The Son of Man will reign, and his saints will stand with him. As we move into the final section, we will meditate on the closing arc of Daniel's life and visions, the seal of prophecy, the endurance of faith, and what it means for those who wait for the kingdom in our own shaking world. Until then, I encourage you, keep your eyes lifted to the Ancient of Days, and let every beast in your life be measured against the greatness of your future king. Let us pause and breathe, as the story that began with the siege of Jerusalem draws toward its silent, profound conclusion. Picture Daniel, no longer the bright youth standing in the shadow of foreign palaces or the bold man confronting kings, but an aged follower of the Most High, marked by wisdom, humility, and a soul as unbowed as ever. The final arc of Daniel's life does not close with the grand applause of the world, but with a holy quietness. the kind that belongs to those who have seen kingdoms rise and crumble, and whose hope rests not in what is seen, but in the one who rules the ages. Daniel's latter years were not spent on thrones of comfort, but in prayer and fasting, often wrestling with visions that grew ever more mysterious and weighty. He bore not only the pain of exile and the scars of personal trials, but also the burden of knowing, of seeing in dreams and revelations the unfolding of destinies still far off, as well as secret sufferings for the people of God. In these final chapters, his life becomes a living meditation on perseverance, hope, and the ultimate faithfulness of God. It was in these days that Daniel received his greatest and most troubling visions. He fasted for 3 weeks by the Tigris River, mourning for his people, seeking understanding. It was a quiet act, as if time itself slowed and all creation paused to listen. The heavens answered. Suddenly, a figure clothed in linen, whose face shone like lightning, and whose voice echoed with the sound of a multitude, appeared before him. Daniel's strength fled. Even his companions, though they saw nothing, felt such terror that they ran to hide. Alone, weak, Daniel heard this message. Do not fear, Daniel, for from the first day that you set your heart to understand and humbled yourself before your God, your words have been heard. And with those words, a window opens for us all. Prayer is not wasted breath, nor is suffering in secret unseen. Sometimes God's answer is wrestled for in heavens beyond our sight. But he hears, he remembers, he responds. The vision that followed was no less than a spiritual history of the world, a cosmic drama of wars, rises and falls, betrayals, deliverances, until time itself would be unsealed. The angel revealed the clash of future empires, the Persians, then the Greeks under a mighty king who would break into 4 kingdoms after him, and then a succession of rulers, some noble, many ruthless. Central was a figure named not by a human title, but by his actions, a despicable person, a king who would profane the temple, persecute the saints, and exalt himself above every god. He would rise only for a time, for God alone controls the calendar of evil's reign. And then, as if a storm passed, light breaks. At that time, Michael, the great prince who stands watch over your people will arise, and your people will be delivered, everyone whose name is found written in the book. The vision ends not with destruction, but with prophecy of resurrection, one of the earliest and clearest in all the scriptures. Many of those who sleep in the dust of the earth shall awake, some to everlasting life, and some to shame and everlasting contempt. Those who are wise shall shine like the brightness of the sky above, and those who lead many to righteousness, like the stars forever and ever. Here, Daniel is told, seal up the words, for they pertain to the end. These are mysteries that will be sought after in days of trial, when knowledge increases and hearts tremble at what is to come. Daniel asks, his voice weaving with the yearning of every soul who has suffered without seeing the end, how long until these wonders are fulfilled? The answer is gentle, not harsh. Go your way, Daniel, for the words are shut up and sealed until the time of the end. But you, go your way till the end, and you will rest, and stand in your allotted place at the end of days. This is the deep wisdom of Daniel's final years. Not everything will be given to us now. We see parts, we wait in the dark, we carry burdens whose meaning is often beyond our comprehension. Yet hope shines in the promise that the story is not over. We are to live faithfully in what we know, trusting the author whose victory has already been decreed. Throughout his life, Daniel was given revelations that spanned the rise and fall of empires, the mystery of the Messiah, the persecution and deliverance of God's people, and the glories to come. Yet he himself never returned to Jerusalem, never saw the physical restoration of Zion for which he longed. He lived and died in a foreign land, but his soul was anchored in a city whose builder and maker is God. Daniel's example. His courage. Before men, his humility before heaven, his perseverance in prayer, and his quiet obedience in things great and small leaves us a pattern to follow. He reminds us that we are exiles too, strangers and sojourners in a world that is not finally our home. Like Daniel, we may face lions' dens and fiery furnaces, the jealousy of peers, the decrees of kings, and the silence of God. Yet also, like Daniel, we are invited to root our lives deeper, not in outcomes, not in understanding, but in faithfulness, to the God who outlasts exile and hears every whispered prayer. The New Testament echoes Daniel in surprising ways. Jesus himself, when standing trial and facing death, declared, "You will see the Son of Man seated at the right hand of power and coming with the clouds of heaven." Paul writes, "To this end we toil and strive, because we have our hope set on the living God." Peter calls us a chosen generation, a royal priesthood, a holy nation, a people for his own possession, so that you may proclaim the excellencies of him who called you out of darkness into his marvelous light. John's visions in Revelation draw continually on the images first revealed to Daniel: beasts, thrones, books, judgments, victories, because the story is one. And so now, as we close this immersion in the life and visions of Daniel, let your heart rest in what is most essential. God is sovereign, ruling over all the kingdoms of the world and over the secret places of each heart. Suffering endures for a night, but joy comes in the morning. The saints are called not always to understand now, but to endure, to love, to kneel in prayer with open windows, whatever the cost. Our deepest security does not come from the absence of lions or flames, or from being able to see the whole future, but from belonging to the everlasting kingdom, whose gates can never be shaken. So take courage, dear listener, beloved seeker. You are not forgotten in exile. Your prayers are heard and remembered. Your story, though sometimes lived in obscurity, sometimes amid turmoil, has meaning woven into it by the Eternal One, who knows your name and numbers your days. As this series draws to a close, I invite you once again. If this journey has strengthened you, inspired you, or stirred your longing for the kingdom that Daniel saw from afar, please like this message and subscribe to Jesus Speaks Today. Share below the wisdom or questions that linger with you. What does Daniel's faith awaken in your own life, your own waiting, your own hope? You too are part of a generation chosen for such a time as this, a people called out by God's love, not to fear the fires or the lions, nor to be undone by the confusion of empires, but to shine as stars, pointing the way toward the unshakable reign of the Son of Man. As the psalmist wrote, "The Lord is my light and my salvation. Whom shall I fear? The Lord is the stronghold of my life. Of whom shall I be afraid?" May Daniel's God be your God. May his story be not just a tale of ages past, but a living witness within your own life, anchoring you in faith, patience, and hope that refuses to fade. Stand firm, walk humbly, pray boldly, and know that he who has promised is faithful. And in the fullness of time, when the books are opened and the weary are called home, may you, like Daniel, rise to receive your inheritance, star-bright, eternal, and secure in the presence of the Ancient of Days. Until that day, shalom, chosen ones. Keep seeking, keep shining, and let his kingdom come, both now and forevermore.